Hey Guru Nation, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I have a video for you sites out there, for you research clinics, okay? We work with a lot of startup research sites, a lot of research naive physicians that want to open up their own clinics. And so, they're always nervous about their first site selection visits. So just to get to that point, if you're a research naive physician or you're a brand new research site, you've already done something right. Or you're doing this at a time in the market where sponsors are in high demand for sites. Okay, so one of those two things. But consider yourself fortunate because many don't even get to this point. And a site selection visit is really more or less a formality. So a sponsor is going to know pretty much from your feasibility survey whether, and from the CV of the PI, whether your site would be appropriate for the particular study. So the study is yours to lose at the site selection visits. All right, you pretty much have it already, unless you screw up or do something you're not supposed to do, or say something you're not supposed to say, or say something that would trigger red flags, which I'll kind of guide you through, and we guide all of our clients on this as well. So let me just walk you through a site selection visit. I've done a lot of these things in my QA positions with previous companies, with companies that I've owned, with companies that I've contracted for. I'm an independent contract CRA as well. So I'm going to walk you through a site selection visit, and from the eyes of a CRA, right, and the eyes of a CRO, what do they want to see from you, the research site? So obviously they want to know who your PI is, who your staff are, okay? Are they GCP trained? Do the coordinators have the necessary IATA certifications? Any other training that the PI or the study staff have conducted, such as the National Institute of Health Protecting Human Research Subjects, which is not mandatory, unlike GCP or IATA, but it is helpful to have. And so any other trainings, like my CRA Academy would be a perfect example of an additional training that's not mandatory. So then they go through the protocol synopsis. So they'll pretty much go through the slides of the protocol if they have slides. If they don't, they'll go through the synopsis with you for the study. They're going to talk about the study objective and design, visit schedule and procedures, the inclusion-exclusion criteria, enrollment, randomization, the investigational product administration procedures. They're going to, if they have the investigator's brochure, which is all the information that is readily known about the study drug, they're going to share some of that with the PI. They're going to ask you for your process of informed consent. Okay, I have videos on this. Make sure you don't screw up that question. That's generally a big indicator into whether a site knows what they're doing or they don't, is if they can answer the process of consent. What is your site's process of consent? How do you consent subjects? So I'm not going to get into these answers because I have videos for all of these topics on YouTube, right? So just search for process of consent on YouTube and you'll find it. Okay, it doesn't even have to be mine, but you'll probably see mine on there. What about data capture? Do you have EDC experience? Does your site have EDC experience? They may even ask, if they think that you're lying or that you don't, they may ask which vendors, which EDC systems have you used, okay? So also, what is the process for capture and storage of source docs? How do you create your own source documents? If they ask you that question and you're looking at your colleagues like you don't know what they're talking about, that's another indication that you don't know. You probably don't have the experience that you said you did. Okay. Does the site use electronic medical records? It's either yes or no. Okay, so these are the things that the monitors will ask you, and then they get into patient recruitment because that's huge, and they're basically going to be confirming whether what you or your site entered on the feasibility questionnaire is still accurate. And make sure if you're the research site that you talk to your PI and you guys are all on the same page as far as the numbers, right? Where are the patients coming from? Are they coming from your own database? Are you going to be using advertising, online, offline advertising, referrals from other doctors? Make sure you guys are all in agreement, okay? Does the PI have the potential to recruit the required number of subjects within the agreed timelines? All right, what are the recruitment strategies planned? What has worked well in the past? What hasn't? You need to be able to speak about these things on a high level if you want to instill confidence in the CRA, because the CRA, when they're done with the site selection visit, which could take anywhere from 1 to 4 hours, they have to write a report, right? And basically on that report, they're going to be either recommending you or not recommending you, okay? And again, most of the time, if you have a site selection visit, you're pretty much going to get the study. Nothing's guaranteed, but it's very likely that you're going to get the study. Like I said before, the study is yours to lose at that point, okay? Is there a potential conflict with other studies? So do you have competing studies, right? The answer should be honest, of course, but that doesn't mean the same indication, all right? So just because you have 2 diabetes studies, that doesn't necessarily mean they're competing. So look at the protocols that you have, see what the inclusion-exclusion criteria is, and then talk about why you have patients that could fit in the study and not compete with another study. Or maybe you don't have competing studies because you're a research-naive site. That's most likely to be the case. Then they're going to ask more questions about the PI and the staff. They're going to remind you of the 1572, which is the PI's agreement with the FDA. It's a signed contract that the PI has with the FDA that they are aware of their obligations as far as following GCP and the protocol and all that stuff. Does the PI provide adequate evidence of their qualifications? So CV, medical license, make sure it's not expired, make sure you have the correct, the most recent medical license, DEA number if you need it for a controlled substance study, and then make sure that the GCP has been done within the past year, okay? They're going to ask, does the PI have sufficient time to conduct the study? So, this is a tricky one because PIs rarely have time. And then they're going to ask, how often is the PI on site? So what kind of site do you have? Do you have a standalone research center where the PI comes when needed? Or is the research site located in the PI's office? Okay, that's gonna determine how you answer that question. Then they're gonna get into the study coordinator. Who's the study coordinator? How many studies have they done? Are they IATA certified? Who else is gonna be involved in the study? Who enters data? Who dispenses the investigational product? Who does vital signs? Who does ECGs? Who's the sub-I? Who's going to do these rating scales? These are the questions they ask. Then they're going to do a tour of your facility. So make sure you have calibration logs and stickers and records. Make sure you have your temperature logs on the IP drug room. Even if you don't have IP in there, I get it if it's your first study. But keeping a log with a min-max thermometer shows that you're following industry standards. Okay, if you're not doing that, the monitor is going to look. The monitor, when they do a site tour, they're going to look. And if they don't see a temperature log and then they ask you and you say, oh, we don't have one yet, well, it's not good. You don't want to do that. You might as well have one there. Okay? Can you use a central IRB? Can you use a central lab? These are the things they'll ask. They'll ask you about emergency procedures. If a subject is on site and has an emergency, what do you do? Well, depends on your site, okay? Typically, the answer is you call 911. But at some sites, like phase 1 sites or inpatient studies, they actually have the emergency personnel on site. So that really depends on what kind of site you have, okay? Do you have a backup generator? Do you do routine monitoring of the refrigerator and freezer? These are for PK samples or certain IPs that are refrigerated, okay? Do you have an alarm system for power outages? Then they ask about the IRB, so I think I went through that. Typically, most sites will use central IRB. If you're asked that question, do you use central or local? You don't want to say I don't know. Again, that's another indication that you don't know what you're doing. Most likely you're using a central IRB unless you're a hospital or an academic institution. So again, that's one of those other questions, just like the EDC, which EDC systems have you used? If you don't have an answer, it's indicative that you don't know what you're talking about, okay? Then they get into audits. Have you ever been audited by a regulatory agency? Do you have written SOPs? Okay, then oftentimes from that question, they ask about your process of consent, which we've talked about earlier. How quickly do you do regulatory startup? How quickly do you do contracts and budgets? Do you need IRB approval prior to doing contracts and budgets? Then they talk about the monitoring plan and the monitor visit frequency. So typically it's every 6 to 8 weeks, but every protocol is different. Where will the monitor work when the monitor shows up? And questions like that. So then they have findings, or what's called action items. So as an example, let's say you don't have your calibration logs, but you have your calibration stickers on your equipment. An action item might be, please email monitor a copy of your site calibration equipment log, okay? Or another action item might be, you don't have a temperature log. Please email monitor a copy of your temperature log. Those are action items, okay? So then they go through study forecast. How many patients are you planning to screen? How many patients do you plan to screen per month? What's your screen fail rate? What's your strategies for retention? What do you do for loss to follow-up subjects? You got to know these things, and I have videos on all this, and maybe each of these little topics could be a separate video, which I'll do later. But right now, that's enough. You can Google all these things, or you can just look on YouTube. I've got tons of these videos myself, but there's also a bunch of other videos, or maybe not videos, but a bunch of other information out there as well if you just Google what I mentioned, all right? And as always, if you have questions, email me, dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com, or call or text me 949-415-6256. Thank you very much. Follow me on all those social networks too. Links are underneath the video. Bye-bye.